I'd like to talk about the recent System Shock remake, but first I feel like I need to contextualize my experience with the original System Shock. I finished System Shock somewhere in the distant eons of time. It left a strong impression on me, but most of what I remember is the first floor, Medical, the section featured on the demo, which I would have played over and over again more than anything else. At the time, it was visually impressive, but young as I was, I think I realized how unique it was compared to other computer games. Doom was released in December 1993, and System Shock was released 9 months later in September 94, and had a more sophisticated 3D engine, physics simulation, 16 weapons, some with multiple ammo types, and various other neat systems. But these were very different types of game. System Shock was the nascent form of the immersive sim genre, not the first-person shooter, and its lineage lies in the first-person dungeon-crawling RPG. More specifically, Ultima Underworld. Releasing in March 1992, the original Ultima Underworld was the first 3D-ish, indoor, real-time, first-person game to allow the player to look up and down and to jump. A non-linear game that took place in a vast dungeon with its own factions and ecology, with systems for lighting, cooking, and spellcasting. Wolfenstein 3D, which, unlike Underworld, took place on a flat plane, came out 2 months after Ultima Underworld, and looks juvenile in comparison. Again, these are very different games, and this is like comparing arcade games to Sims, but I need to impress to you the sophistication of these games for their time. These RPGs, Underworld and System Shock, were both cutting edge. System Shock was conceived by the developers while they were working on Ultima Underworld 2. As mentioned, System Shock is at essence a dungeon crawler set on a space station, but so much of its strength lies in that setting. A dungeon is cold, impassive stone, dirt, wood, ancient traps, some monsters and evil at the bottom. If the dungeon is actually a space station and it's actively being manipulated by a malicious, all-seeing, sociopathic, narcissistic god, it leaves you with a greater impression on your relationship with your environment. She's always there watching through her cameras as she taunts, insults,
enter the room, insect,
plays traps, and initiates countermeasures or counterattacks. Unlike Ultima Underworld, there are no NPCs to talk to. The developers decided dialogue trees would break immersion. Instead, logs from the crew would help players learn more about how to move through the station, the crew's story and the station story. The lack of survivors also adds to the isolation, as you crawl through the station like the proverbial insect that you are. Setting a dungeon crawler on a space station was a stroke of genius, and allowed for so much more from your antagonists, but also uniquely anchors and informs your motivations, your goals, your objectives. And they do get a lot of mileage out of the objectives. And here's where nostalgia meets reality. System Shock is a long game, and it can feel longer if you don't stop, take stock of the situation, and consider your objectives. Many times I expected to brute force progress by wandering the corridors aimlessly, hoping to bump into the correct direction. I wouldn't. Don't be me. Either refer to your logs or choose the difficulty option that gives you waypoints. Just like the original, the various difficulty options should be pondered carefully. Do not bite off more than you can chew and exhaust yourself out of the experience. I played the game at regular difficulty and the game was surprisingly hard. I regret to say I'm an unabashed, save-scumming, item hoarder, trying to eke out every last drop of the last trip to the medbay. Enemies would often get the drop on me, or my damage output failed me, or I forgot to use protection, and I would die. Maybe by an enemy, maybe by wandering into an irradiated room. The game can also be an actual maze, particularly if you're looking for that last camera. I think I might be incapable of throwing grenades in this game. The game is very faithful to the original, but movement has been redone. It feels better, but sometimes I seem to be caught on objects or the sides of walls, but not so much that I couldn't endure. Occasionally when boost running, I would ping pong off walls, though I'd personally consider that a feature, not a bug. Melee range also feels far too short, especially compared to the original. Gone also is a strange button-operated interface from the original. Pong chads will be in disarray. The new interface seems inspired possibly by Deus Ex or Prey, and the limited space leans into the survival aspect. The game looks good while still remaining faithful to the original, and the gibs and sprays of blood can be quite artistic. One complaint is that the bloom can be blinding, particularly on puzzles. The music leans into a more ambient direction with good sound design, and some of the enemy quips remind me, whether on accident or by design, of the voices from System Shock 2.
Out of place. The many sings to us. No matter.
I've never been one to look at reviews. I like to get a general impression of quality, and then if a game's motifs or imagery appeals to me in some way, I tend to be drawn in. So I present this to you as my impressions with a comment of the game's historical importance in birthing one of my favourite genres. I enjoyed my time with System Shock, and my respect for the accomplishments of the original have only been reaffirmed and restored from the mists of my hazy recollection. And so too has my fear and respect for Shodan. I look forward to the remake of System Shock 2.